is a moment when we best be continuing to focus intensively on another and, frankly, very ominous foreign adversary, and that is, of course, the Chinese Communist Party. We're watching its ambitions to dominate the world play out in various ways and theaters. Unrestricted warfare is, of course, the doctrine that they have been applying. And we're watching in particular, at least if we're paying attention, how this is shaping the geostrategic environment in the Pacific, the Western Pacific, the South Pacific, most especially. And to give us a read on what is actually happening and its import, I'm always delighted to have with us Grant Newsham. He is a retired colonel in the United States Marine Corps. He has also served as a foreign service officer, as a businessman in Japan. He knows East Asia extremely well, and he is continuing his service, among other things, as a senior fellow of the Center for Security Policy and also a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China. It's great to have him in the house virtually, as always. Grant, welcome back to Securing America, sir.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Let me ask you about the foreign minister of China, Wang is his name, and the island hopping campaign that he performed in recent days on a number of these South Pacific islands. The upshot of it, we're told it was kind of a bust. Is that so? And if it's not so, what does it portend?
You're right, Frank. It has been reported as if it was a failure and the Pacific Islanders have all stood up to China and sent them packing. It really wasn't that at all. What happened is that the foreign minister, Wang Yi, he tried to offer a comprehensive deal to about 10 Pacific Island nations. And the deal was they would have this deep cooperation on environment, commercial, law enforcement, and even security matters with the People's Republic of China. Sort of almost a formal deal in all of these areas. And the a couple of them sort of bit on it, but most of them did not. And that was largely, I think, partly due they don't like the Chinese all that much if they had any opportunities. But the president of Micronesia, a country with close ties to America, wrote a really courageous letter explaining the risk and saying he was not going to sell out for 30 pieces of silver, and he didn't recommend anyone else do it. And that had a huge effect. So the Chinese, they overreached. It'd be like proposing marriage for someone you thought was ready, and they said, "Whoa, not so fast." So the press reaction, the media, the commentary is that this was a great defeat for the Chinese, that it sent them packing, and that's that. But no, they'll be back, and they've said so. And they did sign deals with Tonga and Solomon Islands, and there's maybe Kiribati, old Tarawa that some Americans might remember. They did sign those deals, and that doesn't get as much attention as it should. So the Chinese will be back, and that's the point, because they're building on 30 years of establishing commercial inroads, political influence throughout the Pacific. And the only thing missing has been the military component, and that is coming, and that's a big difference. So we're finding really the Chinese pop up all over the place behind us. We've been defending farther west, and now throughout the Pacific, you're going to see more and more of a Chinese military presence. It'll come slowly, but it's coming. And a year ago, everybody poo-pooed that idea, and now here we are. The Chinese have taken the gloves off.
Yeah. The mask is slipped, as they say.
Mhm.
I haven't talked with you since a very interesting video began circulating, Grant. It is a reportedly a videotape of a secret meeting, top secret meeting at that, of senior party officials and military officers in Guangdong province in China, which is reported to have as its purpose planning at the direction of the government in Beijing for the transition from, quote, normal to war, unquote. Um, if you can, tell us what you make of that uh, video, its authenticity, I guess, for starters, but what in particular it is telling us about the direction of Chinese policy, the mask having slipped in some respects, as you say, in some of the outer islands, but more broadly, does this in fact portend, in your judgment, the advent of full on hostilities with the Chinese Communist Party, perhaps not confined to Taiwan, but other places, perhaps even our own territory?
Yeah, I think we have to assume, at least if you're wise, that this is what they have in mind. Whether or not the video, the audio was genuine or accurate, it certainly captured the tone, the feeling that you see on the Chinese side, and you have to take this seriously. And that's the important thing from my perspective. It was very interesting to hear what they were saying. But if you've anyone in the intelligence business knows that you've really got to know you know what the reality of the particular piece of intelligence is. Does the CIA know? Given their track record, I wonder. But I think any of us who followed this, that we can at least see that, this is, it sounds right. And they have said what they're going to do to Taiwan, and we really ought to take them seriously. And some very good analysts in the Pacific have even said within a few years that this is a real possibility. The Taiwanese have mentioned 2005. They know a little bit about China. You really have to take it seriously. It was one more piece of the puzzle that really makes you a little bit uncomfortable.
Indeed, it does. Grant, you had participated with Dr. Stephen Bryan at the Center for Security Policy in pulling together a very impressive expert panel, including, among others, the former commanders of U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Marine Corps personnel in the Pacific to discuss what can be done, what must be done to stop an invasion of Taiwan. I really commend it to our audience. It's a very quick read and has 34 specific practical recommendations as to what must be done. I guess it against the backdrop of that tape, two questions occur. One is the timing of these preparations in China seems to indicate that this is being fast tracked. This is the next 90 days, by some estimates, for those preparations to be complete. Now, whether that means that the war begins, before November 1st, I guess is an open question, but it suggests that it could well be not 2025, not 2030,
Mm-hmm.
but imminently. And secondly, I guess the question of the implication of this uh, tape and a lot of other evidence that's out there, including a speech by Chi Hao-chen, the defense minister of China 20 years ago, to a secret gathering of party cadre, suggests that the main target is the United States, not just Taiwan. Talk, if you would, quickly in 2 minutes' time about both of those questions, if you would.
Well, last one first. Yes, America is the target, and China's been very clear about this. They gave the PLA its marching orders after Tiananmen Square 30 years ago to be able to defeat an enemy that has aircraft carriers. And the Chinese have been very clear about this. We've just never wanted to believe it, or at least too many of our ruling class has not been willing to. And that is something you always have to keep in mind. This is not just about Taiwan. This is ultimately about defeating the United States. And defeat can mean different things, but at a minimum, it is absolute domination of us. So we take orders from them, even if not physical occupation. in terms of what you do with Taiwan. And that's to me, one of the important things is, okay, we know the Chinese are pretty serious. We know they may be coming. What do you do? And that's where we have to do some things very quickly. And that is the first thing is break Taiwan out of its military isolation. Uh, you have got to get the US to actually engage with the Taiwan military, get in there, train with them, bring them out to train with us, actually set up some planning cells, headquarters in Taiwan, but break that isolation. And that is a pretty clear sign that if China wants a real war with us, it's going to get it. And that really is the only thing, I'm afraid, that will deter them. Of course, you need hardware. You need the right long range weapons, smart mines in particular that can sail out and actually listen for the right ship and go attack it and sink it. That you can make life so miserable for Chinese attackers that they run out of ships and aircraft before Taiwan runs out of anti ship missiles
Mm.
and stingers, that sort of thing. And so those are the things that need done right now.
Yeah, there will only be that kind of uh, stockpile of such defensive weapons if a lot more is added to it. At the
Mhm.
moment, I'm not entirely clear that we've got the wherewithal to do it, but we better get about it, that's
Yeah.
for sure. Colonel Grant Newsham, we have to leave it at that for the moment. This is a very important update, and we look forward to the next one with you in the very near future. Next up, though, we've got Colonel John Mills, United States Army, retired. We'll take stock with him on some of this and more right after this.